After years spent on foreign battlefields, Edouard, a decorated black soldier, boards the plane to finally return to his homeland. He is a man marked by war, his gaze reflecting both the fatigue and resilience of a soldier who has seen and experienced the unimaginable. Tired but relieved, he welcomes this stage of the journey with deep gratitude. To his great surprise, he is offered a first-class ticket, a gesture of recognition for his service to the country. This unexpected attention warms his heart, as too often he has felt forgotten and disregarded by those he protected. As he enters the first-class cabin, Edouard feels a mixture of excitement and reservation. He thinks that, finally, for the first time in a long while, he can relax in relative comfort, away from the tension and constant noise. As he settles into his spacious seat, he savors this rare luxury, a brief respite that almost makes him forget the weight of his memories. The soft, dim light and attentive service contrast sharply with the meager rations and cold nights spent under the stars in unknown lands. However, things take an unexpected turn on board. Edouard, who expected to find some respect and recognition for his years of service in first class, faces a much different reality. Far from the honor and gratitude he hoped for, he is confronted with looks of judgment and disdain. The other passengers, accustomed to this privileged section, eye him critically, their gazes reflecting veiled hostility. To them, his worn uniform and battle-worn face seem out of place in this luxurious environment, where calm and elegance reign. As he tries to ignore these looks and find some semblance of peace, a man with a piercing gaze and an arrogant demeanor breaks the silence, with a cruel remark. Dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, he approaches Edouard with a contemptuous expression and, in a cold and haughty voice, says, "I didn't know first class was now open to beggars." The remark sends a shiver through Edouard, but he remains calm, clenching his fists under the table to control the anger and humiliation rising within him. After all he's been through, Edouard wonders how someone can be so insensitive, so blind to the value of the sacrifices made for the safety of all. This contempt seems all the more unjust since he has risked his life to defend the ideals of a country where people like this man live in carefree luxury. Yet, despite the rising rage within him, he holds his composure. On the battlefields, he learned to dominate his emotions, to control his impulsivity. The adrenaline of combat and the anxiety of loss have forged him into a man of calm and resilience. He knows this moment of confrontation, though difficult, does not deserve to take away his dignity. The man, however, is not finished. He continues, a smug smile plastered on his face, throwing a disdainful glance at Edouard's uniform. Maybe there was a mistake. People like you are more at home in the economy section. His voice drags on each word, as if to emphasize its cruelty, ensuring they reach Edouard with the harshness he intends. Edouard takes a deep breath, trying to maintain control in the face of the insult. Around them, some passengers whisper, some with cruel curiosity, others exchanging knowing glances with the arrogant man, sharing his contempt. A flight attendant passes by, hesitates to intervene, then quickly moves away, preferring to avoid any confrontation. But Edouard then feels a quiet determination welling up within him. An inner voice reminds him that he has nothing to prove to these people. He knows his worth, and none of them can tarnish the value of his actions or understand the sacrifices he has made. "I am a sergeant in the United States Army," he responds in a calm but firm voice, so that everyone around him can hear. "I spent months serving my country, away from my family, so that people like you can live in peace. My ticket is first class because I earned this moment of rest after years of service. You can despise my uniform, but it represents much more than you can imagine." The man is caught off guard. For a moment, the arrogance in his eyes falters, shaken by Edouard's calm strength. But he quickly regains his composure and, in a biting tone, says, the army, always begging for privileges for doing a job no one asked them to do." His remark is meant to be lethal, but it bounces harmlessly off Edouard, who remains impassive. The words of this man have no power to affect him. He has survived much worse. Edouard feels a wave of heat rising within him, but not just anger. He perceives something deeper in this man, a subtle sadness hidden behind the apparent arrogance. It was as if, beyond the words and gestures, the man was projecting buried fears and old wounds. It wasn't just about status or merit, but about deeply ingrained principles. The man didn't just see a soldier. He saw a black man in a space reserved for the privileged, an intrusion into a world he struggled to keep homogeneous and in line with his preconceived notions. "Listen," Edouard says, trying to stay calm in the face of this provocation, "I just want to go home." He knows these simple words carry much more than a desire for rest. They reflect a desperate need to reunite with his family, to return to a normal life after the horrors he experienced on the battlefield. But these words also resonate in another way in this exchange. They symbolize the right of everyone, no matter where they come from, to find their place in the world. It wasn't just a personal request, but a universal claim, an echo of all the struggles fought for recognition and equality. The man sneers, a cold and cruel sound. "Go home? You think it's that simple? You soldiers go off to play heroes, and then you come back thinking everything is owed to you. Here, it's Africa, where you're better accepted." He crosses his arms, his face hardened by years of prejudice and resentment. But here it's different. Here, it's for those who have really worked for their place. His words flow with tragic certainty, as if he truly believed that a man's worth was measured by the color of his skin and his socioeconomic status. Edouard feels indignation rise within him, but he doesn't let anger take over. Instead, he seeks to understand. Why was this man so bitter? Why did he see an enemy in someone who, like him, was part of the same society, the same nation? A flicker of compassion begins to filter through his indignation. He realizes that behind this mask of contempt lies vulnerability, a fear of losing what one believes to be a divine right to prosperity. "I am not here to claim privileges," Edouard continued, his voice taking on a softer, almost empathetic tone. "I am here to reclaim my place, just like everyone else. I serve my country with honor, not for favors, but because I believe in protecting those around me. I am not trying to take your place, but to earn mine, just like you." This attempt at calming the situation seemed to have no effect on the man, who remained fixed in his preconceived notions. Edouard realized he was speaking to a wall, to someone deeply entrenched in their misguided beliefs. It pained him to see how blind some people could be to the suffering of others, but he also knew that his own dignity was something he could control. "Maybe you haven't had the chance to see the world differently," he said finally, his gaze steady on the man. "Maybe we all need a little more empathy and understanding. I am not your enemy. I hope one day you will be able to look beyond the color of my skin and recognize what I have accomplished." Edouard turned away, leaving the man with his thoughts, a mix of irritation and sadness in his heart. In that moment, he realized that the real battle wasn't just being fought on the battlefield, but also in the minds and hearts of those who still had so much to learn about solidarity and compassion. As he looked out the window, the landscape unfolding beneath him, he hoped that one day, this nation would recognize the worth of everyone, regardless of their color or history. Edouard felt the sting of the man's words sink deep into him, each one sharpened with calculated contempt, like a knife plunged into his self-esteem. He was no longer simply a tired man returning from a mission. He found himself suddenly reduced to a stereotype, frozen in the racist, condescending gaze of this stranger. These words, laden with arrogance and hatred, echoed centuries of prejudice and injustice, a reminder of all the invisible barriers that people continued to erect. Yet, Edouard knew he could not let himself be swept away by anger. The army had taught him to control his emotions, to remain upright even under the worst pressures. In this first class, it wasn't just about responding to this man. He knew his words would carry the dignity of all those who, like him, had suffered the same prejudices. He took a deep breath, finding the courage to respond, to rise above this humiliation without losing his own dignity. He looked up, fixing his gaze on his interlocutor with calm. This ticket was given to me in recognition of my years of service, of the time spent defending values I deeply believe in. Maybe for you, my presence is an inconvenience. For me, it's a symbol of the respect I've earned through my sacrifice." He paused, allowing his words to sink into the heavy silence of the cabin. "What you see is just one part of my story, a uniform, a skin color. But I know exactly who I am and what I've gone through to be here today." The man raised his eyebrows, a cold smile on his lips, as if amused by Edouard's words. "Yes, yes, the great soldier coming back from a mission to save the world, right?" he mocked, crossing his arms with a smug satisfaction. "But here, in this cabin, that doesn't matter. It's not your courage that gives you a place among us, but your ability to buy it. You have nothing in common with the people who travel here. You're out of place." These words froze the air between them, crystallizing the deep divide in their perspectives and values. Edouard wondered how many people had been judged and rejected simply for daring to believe in their right to exist freely and without shame. The gaze of the other passengers weighed on him, sometimes complicit, sometimes disapproving, some staring at the man in admiration for his bluntness, others turning their eyes to avoid getting involved in the incident. It was as if the plane had become a stage where a drama far larger than their simple exchange was playing out, the drama of a world divided by barriers of appearance and wealth. Edouard took a deep breath, trying to contain the emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. He knew that responding with anger would only reinforce the stereotypes this man harbored. He needed something stronger, something that would transcend the hatred the man projected. "What you call comfort," he continued in a calm but emotionally charged voice, "is something I've often risked my life to protect. When I stood on the ground, facing danger, I didn't think about skin color, social class, or status. I served with people from all walks of life, men and women who all deserve respect, no matter their background." The man listened with an expression mixed with disdain and suspicion, but Edouard did not waver. He now felt the urge to make this universal truth heard, a truth that could not be silenced by prejudice and arrogance. "Appearances are deceiving," he continued, his gaze softening but his voice remaining firm. "What I've done, what I've lived through, is priceless, and it goes beyond the simple question of money or privilege. You can choose to reduce me to what you think you see, but I know my worth, even if it doesn't shine through expensive clothes." These words had shaken the man's certainties, leaving him in tense silence, his mocking smile gone. A few passengers, moved by Edouard's words, exchanged glances, some discreetly nodding in approval. An elegantly dressed woman seated a few rows away turned to him, her gaze filled with respect. "Thank you, sir, for your service. It is not the class of our seats that defines us, but the greatness of our actions." The man, taken aback by this unexpected support, looked away, visibly unsettled. Perhaps for the first time, he was sensing the depth of his own prejudices. Edouard felt a flicker of hope, small but present. He knew that this battle, against ignorance and intolerance, would not be won in a single dramatic moment, but through small victories, seeds of understanding planted in moments like this. The flight attendant, sensing the rising tension, placed a calming hand on the back of one of the seats, trying to restore a semblance of calm. She gave the man a firm yet compassionate look. "Sir, our company values every passenger. Being here is indeed a privilege, but it is a privilege accessible to anyone who chooses to travel with us." The man threw her a disdainful look, shrugging as if to dismiss the flight attendant and her words. "Oh, that's all well and good," he muttered with a bitter smile. "But those are just words, ideals that ring hollow. The reality is, we're not the same, and no flight attendant is going to make me believe otherwise." Edouard took a deep breath, his fists loosening slightly. He stared at the man with calm intensity, no aggression, but unwavering determination. "You talk about status and privilege, as if they give you the right to judge who deserves to be here. But maybe the real difference between us isn't the class of our tickets, nor the color of our skin, but our ability to respect the value of each person, even beyond what's visible." The passengers, who had previously looked away, began to pay more attention, their gazes shifting between the two men, like spectators to a confrontation between two worldviews. Some murmured to each other. Others seemed to weigh Edouard's words, clearly impressed by the quiet strength he exuded. The man scoffed again, but this time his laugh seemed more nervous, less sure of himself. "Nice speeches," he said with a forced smile, but something in his gaze hinted at a small crack in his confidence. "Believe what you want. I know what I had to sacrifice to get here, and I refuse to share this space with someone who doesn't understand what that means." Edouard tilted his head slightly, his gaze more sorrowful than angry. "You talk about sacrifices? I've made them too, but maybe not in the way you imagine. I've seen things no one should see. I've served alongside men and women who gave everything, and some of them never came home. So don't tell me I don't understand the meaning of sacrifice or merit." The flight attendant, moved by Edouard's words, felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she maintained her professional posture. "Sir," she said, turning to the man with a firmer voice, "it's important to remember that respect is what makes us worthy of this privilege. All of our passengers are here because they have their rightful place." The man straightened up, visibly embarrassed by the attention now focused on him. A few passengers nodded in approval, and a voice was heard from the back, an older man, speaking calmly. "There are people here to travel in peace, not to impose their judgment." The man scowled, realizing he had lost the tacit support of several of his peers. Silent, he shrank back into his seat, his expression tight. Edouard, on the other hand, felt a wave of relief, mixed with satisfaction. He had managed to express his truth without stooping to a lower level, without letting anger take over. The plane continued its ascent, rising above the clouds, and Edouard desperately tried to let the calm of the journey carry away his troubled thoughts. The hum of the engines created a soothing, almost hypnotic melody, but the venomous words of the man and his cold stare refused to leave his mind, like an invisible burn, a painful echo of past discrimination. How, in 2024, could one still encounter such deeply ingrained, fierce prejudices? This simple question spiraled in his mind, leading him into a bitter introspection. He closed his eyes for a moment, recalling a conversation with Malik, his childhood friend, a man he respected for his wisdom and pragmatism. The day before his departure, over coffee, Malik had shared his reflections with a calm tinged with resignation. "You can't escape this kind of behavior, Edouard," he had said, his voice carrying a gravity that touched on a bitter truth. "No matter where you go, no matter what you accomplish, some will only see your color. But remember, that doesn't define your worth. They're the ones trapped in their own prejudices, not you." These words echoed in him, like a necessary reminder. But one question persisted. Should he, too, accept this fate? Give up on the dream of a world where men are judged for what they are, not for what they seem to represent? He knew such a battle was exhausting, a never-ending struggle, but he couldn't imagine simply turning his eyes away, allowing the weight of oppressive gazes to settle without saying anything. It was a burden, certainly, but also a responsibility, a silent fight for dignity. The hostess returned, interrupting his thoughts with a glass of water and a warm smile. She seemed to sense the tension still lingering within him. "Here's your drink, sir. If you need anything, don't hesitate to let me know." He nodded in thanks, touched by her attention, before taking the glass and bringing it to his lips. The cool water slid down his throat, soothing the heat of his indignation. Malik's words returned to him with even more force. "It's not for you to bear the shame, Edouard. It's for them. Their ignorance, their fear. These are their chains. You are free from their judgment, free to be whatever you choose to be." He suddenly felt liberated from a weight, as if the shadow of the man's prejudices was fading, losing its grip on him little by little. He turned his gaze to the porthole, contemplating the endless expanse of clouds stretching beneath him. There, in that vastness, he felt small, yet invincible. He let himself be carried away by happy memories, moments spent with his family. He could hear the warm laughter of his mother, the comforting embraces of his father, the lively conversations around the table, where he needed no justification to be loved and respected. These memories formed a shield against the looks of contempt and sharp words. They reminded him that he belonged to a world where he was valued for who he truly was, far from the stereotypes and expectations of a world blinded by appearances. In this cabin, despite the hostility he felt, he found a certain inner peace, a refuge where he could recharge. Edouard knew that the fight against prejudice was far from over, but he also understood that his strength lay in his ability to stay grounded in his humanity, not allowing himself to be defined by the gaze of others, but by his own values. After several hours of flight, the plane finally began its descent towards the airport. Edouard felt a mixture of excitement and relief at the thought of once again touching the soil of his homeland. Although fatigue weighed heavily on his shoulders, the prospect of seeing his family again and returning to familiar surroundings gave him new energy. Each passing minute brought him closer to that long-awaited moment, and he found himself smiling as he thought of the reunion. Once the plane had landed, Edouard stood up and collected his things, making sure everything was in order. He glanced one last time at the cabin, where the hostess gave him a kind smile, as if she knew what he had been through. Touched by her attention, he thanked her with a nod before leaving the plane. As he walked through the terminal, the bustle around him only heightened his sense of accomplishment, a sort of personal triumph after months of absence. But it was only when he crossed the doors into the arrivals area that he realized the magnitude of what awaited him. A group of high-ranking military officers and police greeted him, an unexpected sight that made his heart race a little faster. The immaculate uniforms, the grave yet respectful faces, spoke to the importance of his mission. One of the officers, a man in a dark suit with a medal on his chest, approached him and shook his hand firmly. "Mr. Bassa, welcome home. We are here to provide you with maximum protection. We have been informed of what happened during your flight. The man who humiliated you was immediately intercepted by the authorities. He is now banned from entering the United States." Edouard was taken aback by the news. He hadn't expected such a reaction to the incident. The information slowly worked its way through his mind, bringing with it a sense of relief. Not from revenge, but because this act symbolized a form of justice he had often thought was unattainable. For the first time in a long time, he felt that the injustice he had suffered would not be swept under the rug. It made him feel as though his voice mattered, that his experiences had been heard. "Thank you," he replied simply, still troubled by the speed of events. The officer continued to explain the security measures that would be put in place, but Edouard lost himself in his thoughts, reflecting on the impact of these events. As he followed the group through the terminal, he began to think about the meaning of this protection. It represented not only immediate support but also a recognition of the struggle that thousands of others faced every day. His heart beat faster, not only from the stress, but also because he began to understand that his return to his homeland could be an opportunity to change things, to make his voice heard, and the voices of those who had been victims of similar injustices. As he moved forward, the familiar faces of his family began to emerge from the crowd. He spotted them easily, their expressions a mixture of excitement and concern. When his eyes met his mother's, he saw the pride in her gaze, but also a palpable worry. Edouard turned to the officer. "I need to see them," he insisted, his heart tightening at the thought of making them wait any longer. "Of course, Mr. Bassa. We will escort you to them," the officer responded with an understanding smile. Edouard was swept away by a wave of emotion, his determination growing as he neared his family. He knew that this day would mark the beginning of a new chapter, not just for him, but for all those who were waiting for a change. As he joined his family, Edouard understood that this protection went beyond physical safety. It was a symbol of a broader commitment, a call for justice and equality. In that moment of reunion, he took a deep breath, ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that his journey had only just begun.